Soon after Obama was sworn in as president in January of this year, a poll study was released ranking the top 20 issues that Americans recognized were the most important to be addressed. Sitting on the top of the list were matters concerning unemployment and the economy, to be followed by issues on healthcare, poverty, and crime. But what about climate change? Global warming, where did that rank in America's list of top priorities? It ranked 20th, the last on the list. Last place. Where are people's moral standards? What are they thinking? What about all the polar bears, penguins, and our grandchildren? They're all going to be displaced if we don't act now to offset the effects of global warming. But have no fear, confirms the behavioral researchers at the Columbia University-based Center for Research on Environmental Decisions. This certified scientific grouping knows exactly what has to be done to condition an otherwise temporal and uncaring population to conform to policies and decisions made for them regarding global warming. Originating from the works of behavioral psychology pioneers Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, the work done by CRED focuses on environmental decision-making. CRED operates from the yet unproven but nonetheless very popular stance that climate change is anthropogenic, namely, that it is caused by human behavior. Therefore, they say, the solution must lie in changing human behavior. The only thing that appears to be an obstacle is that people are predictably unlikely to change their preferred habits to offset something far off into the future. Then the question is, how do you convince someone who asks, "What do I get for changing my lifestyle?" Obediently echoing the doctrines of one of the forefathers of behavioral psychology, Adam Smith, the grouping at CRED adheres to the idea that human beings have two primary systems which guides their decision-making. One, which works analytically, which considers long-term effects, and one that works like a primitive reaction based on immediate feelings and desires. Unfortunately, they say, humans are naturally less inclined to make decisions based on long-term foresight, that people tend not to have strong interests for outcome they have to wait a long time for. All of this ultimately proving that human beings are less than likely to go out of their way to change their lifestyles to prevent a climate disaster far off into the future. But despite this tragic flaw in our moral composition, the behaviorists have a way around exploiting it to our benefit. Their concern is not what people actually think about the science of global warming or the actual effectiveness of green and alternative technologies. Their concern is to understand and apply how people make decisions on matters of the environment under uncertainty. For example, how group dynamics influence your decision-making. In other words, how what other people think frames how you make up your mind. Also, when you're dealing with a population who had just recently experienced a harsh winter, or just simply are not yet convinced by the science of global warming, what do? These uncertainties only serve to feed into reinforcing people's lack of conscientiousness of climate change. Therefore, how do you curb doubts of man-made global warming? CRED member and director of the Yale Project on Climate Change, Anthony Lazarowitz, underscore how society as a whole still sees climate change as a distant problem in a distant time. The logic is simple. If you don't sense an urgency, why change your behavior? And because of that, these behaviorists conclude that we, as a population, will not come to act decisively on global warming unless the appropriate conditions are created to freak us out, so to speak. Based on their research, their next task lies in translating these insights of human behavior into frames and nudges. Behavior is shorthand for creating policies to cater to our otherwise selfish nature to do what they think is the best for all of us. Like creating more convenient, or shall we say more palatable options to convince us to submit to policies like carbon taxes, reducing our lavish lifestyles, cutting back on development, and eating less. These are the objectives of the environmental behaviorists. And all of it are perfectly in line with the social agenda outlined by anthropologist Margaret Mead and her cohorts going back to the famous 1975 conference which gave birth to man-made global warming, an event that had to occur because the preceding global cooling scare wasn't scary enough. The entire conference was operating under the strict British-inspired presumption that mankind's development was and will continue to be the main culprit towards the destruction of our planet. And the only way to prevent that, they agreed, is to get the population to adopt an anti-development, anti-human growth policy. It was out of this that they outlined the need for developing the proper scare stories to carry out their intended agenda. As Mead and her allies stressed throughout the conference and into public outlets later, scary scenarios must be offered to the people. We need to build a system of artificial but effective warnings which will parallel the instincts of animals who flee before the hurricane. Basically, what needs to be induced from the population is a self-acceptance of a continued lowering of living standards, and as an effect, population reduction to offset the non-existent effects of this man-made global warming hoax. Today, as the British Empire's financial system continues to collapse, this historically fascist gang of behaviorists have been kicked into full gear to launch a mass campaign within various think tanks, universities, and even the president's office to profile and then manipulate the citizenry into accepting and participating in its own self-destruction. Furthermore, what people, including those in high levels of policymaking, need to be reminded of is that a population, a citizenry, is not intrinsically incapable of deciding for themselves. The only thing that is lacking today, and has been lacking over the recent decades, is the proper leadership required to provide the necessary directionality out of the current London-steered global breakdown crisis. The immediate options to reverse the current economic and overall cultural crisis has been laid out by Lyndon LaRouche for years, and most emphatically since his July 25, 2007 Washington webcast. We need a global bankruptcy reorganization, wiping off all illegal financial assets and activities, and a four-power strategy including the US, Russia, China, and India committed to global economic development for a growing population. For more from Mr. Lyndon LaRouche, stay tuned to LPAC TV this coming Tuesday, April 28th, 1 p.m. Eastern Time, for LaRouche's live international webcast.